What's up, DanDans? Welcome to the 616 Entertainment Wrestling Podcast, Episode 1. My name is Ian, and I can't believe I'm doing this show. If you want me to be honest with you. I'm a guy who, over the years, over my 27 years on this planet, I have gone through periods of being deeply in love with wrestling, it being my number one hobby, the thing I obsess over, constantly watching it, rewatching it, studying things, going through periods of that to periods of not giving a flying fuck at all. Both sides of the spectrum, both extremes, both ends, polar opposites. I've been through it all as far as being a wrestling fan goes. So if you asked me a couple years ago if I would ever do a podcast that was specifically about wrestling, I would have been like, fuck no. But I'm at a point now where, I'm interested in wrestling again. I'm having a good time watching. I'm having a good time being a fan. I don't have any, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't feel like I have any responsibility to keep up with anything. I don't feel like I have to digest everything that's going on in the wrestling world in order to call myself a fan. At this point, I'm about to be 27. I own my own place. I've got a girlfriend. I've got a lot of friends. I got a lot of hobbies. And if I just want to watch Raw and pay-per-views, that's what the fuck I'm going to do. And I don't have cable. I have Hulu, so I watch the 90-minute version of Raw, and I call it a fucking day. And that's totally fine with me. But before I get too off the rails and get into what this episode is going to be, this is the 616 Entertainment Wrestling Podcast. This is episode 1. And not every episode is going to be myself solo, just talking into a microphone in my bedroom in Oak Forest, Illinois. I am going to have guests on this show. I'm going to have guests like my friends who are actual wrestlers in the business, like Marvelous Matt Nix, Big C Chris Castro, Sean Phoenix, a.k.a. Steve Schneider. If he'll sit down and talk about wrestling with me, I'd love to have freelance wrestling world champion Stevie Fierce on the show. But in his personal life, he never fucking ever wants to talk about wrestling. When he does, he doesn't usually have positive things to say. So those are just a couple of my friends that are active in the wrestling business. I've got friends who are no longer in the wrestling business, like my buddy Maxwell. He was a booker. He was a commentator. I've had all of these guys that I just talked about on the Prime podcast, the 616 Entertainment podcast, which you can listen to on SoundCloud or iTunes. But usually on those shows, I don't want to fucking talk about wrestling. I want to talk about, what are we thinking about? What have you been up to? The fucking universe, robots, scary stories. Who fucking knows? Those shows are totally off the rails. There's no fucking rules. Where this one, I think it would be a great opportunity to talk to these guys about wrestling. Because there are guys out there like Stevie who, they say they don't like wrestling and they shit on it and stuff like that. But obviously, it was your dream growing up. It's what you want to do. And all of my friends that are in wrestling are all really fucking good at it. So, you don't get to be a guy like Matt Nix who owns his own fucking company unless you're good at it, unless you're smart, So all these guys, I would love to get them on the show eventually. I would like to think that they're listening right now and will reach out and text me and say, fuck yeah, I'll be on. Because that's usually how it goes. But yeah, there's going to be topic-specific episodes of this show, like this one is going to be. There's going to be interview episodes, like where I have guys who are in the business on the show. And then there's just going to be ones where maybe I'll talk about the current goings-on or whatever I feel like. Maybe I'll have guests on the show who are not in the business but just want to bullshit wrestling with me. My buddies like Sam Fricky and Captain McKay, other guys who have been on the 616 Entertainment podcast, just stuff we don't usually talk about. So I am really excited to do this show. This one is going to be split into seasons. So the 616 Entertainment podcast, we've done, at the time you're hearing this episode, we've probably done like 197 episodes of that show. And we do them once a week. Never once have we missed a fucking week. There's been an episode every week. The wrestling podcast is not going to be like that. I'm going to do it in seasons. So whether I'm going to do 8 episodes this season or 12 or 14, I haven't really decided yet. We're going to see how it goes. We're going to see if the show builds any traction. We're going to see if people like it. But I think you will. The thing with that is just, when you talk about one specific thing like wrestling, it kind of puts you in a corner a little bit. of needing to have a topic and all that shit. There's a lot that goes into a show like that, so I'm not going to do this one every fucking week until the end of time. This one's going to be split into seasons. I'm going to have a bunch of these ready to go before you even hear this one. So I am excited and embarking on this new project, but I think now, after that little intro, it's time to do that. It's time to embark on this new project. This is episode 1, and I figure, what better way to kick off a new series than with an origin story? This episode is going to be my history with wrestling. And if that sounds boring to you, fuck off. I'm going to tell you guys the story of how I came into even knowing what wrestling was, how I became a fan, highs and lows, all of that shit. So that's what this episode's going to focus on. And fuck it, let's just get going. The funny thing is, I don't even remember what my first exposure to wrestling is. You know, I think like when there's a great couple who have been married for years, what do? They talk about the day they met. You talk to a guy like Anderson Silva, you know, future UFC Hall of Famer, arguably the greatest of all time. Motherfucker, I should have put my phone on vibrate. Obviously one of the greatest of all time. You talk to a guy like that, it's like, how did you know when you wanted to get into martial arts? And he's got this long, detailed story. When's the first time I saw wrestling? No fucking idea. Absolutely none. My first vivid memories of wrestling are actually on WWF Royal Rumble on the Sega Genesis. I was playing with my buddy Bathroom Money Tim Ewers, and we were young, dude. We were probably 6. If we're playing on Sega Genesis, we were probably 6 years old. And we were playing WWF Royal Rumble, and I picked Hulk Hogan specifically because I knew who he was. You know, I didn't know how I knew who he was. Looking back on it now, I don't know how I knew who he was, but you know, Hogan was just one of those larger-than-life names. If you were alive in 1995, 1996, fuck, I guess it wasn't 1996 when we were playing it. It was probably like 1995 or 1994. This was far before the NWO. This was far before Hogan was in WCW. So my facts are already fucked up. Anyway, we're playing Royal Rumble on the Genesis. I pick Hogan just because I knew who he was. He was just a larger-than-life figure. If you were alive back then, you knew who he was. That's all there is to it. So I played as Hogan the first couple times, and then I don't know what it was about him, but I switched over and Bret Hart became my dude. And I don't know if it was the pink and black. I don't know if it was his cool sunglasses or his long hair. I don't know what the fuck it was, but I saw Bret Hart and I was like, that's my dude. That's my favorite. And he became my favorite wrestler. Just like that. Just, I saw his picture, I saw him in the game, instant favorite wrestler. Little quirks I remember about that game was that it lists each wrestler's finishing move at the character select screen. And I remember for Hogan, it said like diving leg drop off the top rope, which he has never ever fucking done in real life. And if anyone disagrees with that, show me proof. Show me the receipts. I need a video of Hogan doing a leg drop off the top rope. Realistically, I think they list his finisher as leg drop off the top rope because anyone can do a fucking leg drop in that game, so it wasn't special to just do some random leg drop. And I remember sitting there with Bathroom Money, and we're reading all the finishing moves, and I see diving leg drop off the top rope. And to me, in my head, a leg drop, because I didn't even know what a leg drop was, I pictured you grab a guy around the waist, like for a German suplex, you jump in the air and you go into like a tombstone position with your knees. So you jump in the air, do a tombstone, and you drop him down on his feet. And I guess in my head that meant you were gonna hurt his legs. You were gonna break his legs or something. Especially if you do that off the top rope. That's what I thought diving leg drop off the top rope meant. That's how early I was into my wrestling fandom, if you will. Is I did not even know what a leg drop was. And that's another interesting thing is I was like balls deep in the video games of wrestling before I was even into wrestling. You know, I was playing Royal Rumble in WWF Raw all the time, and I didn't give a fuck about the real life product. And the other interesting thing is these were all WWF games. I had no idea what WCW was, but I grew up a WCW kid. But, you know, fast forward just a little bit. maybe a couple of years. And I remember I was at my friend Chris McDermott's house, and he had, I think it was like Nitro on the TV, WCW Monday Nitro. And I look at it and I see Raven like sitting in the corner of some like fucked up boiler room or whatever. And he was cutting a promo, and they were all enthralled. They were wrestling fans already. And I saw it, and I turned to him and I go, "You know this is fake, right?" And I'll never forget it. Chris McDermott looked at me dead in the face and he goes, "Yeah, so?" That changed my fucking life. I don't know what it was about that hit me so hard, but it did. You know, he just straight up, he was just like, "Yes, I know, and who fucking cares?" As a child, to me, that changed the whole game. Because if you look at it as like, oh, wrestling's fake or whatever, what was I into at that age? I was into Batman. I was into Ninja Turtles. I was into Power Rangers. What do those things all have in common? They all have fights in them. They all have cool characters in them. And they're all fucking fake. So to me, wrestling at that age, it was like, oh man, this is like real life Batman. This is like real life Power Rangers. It changed my whole life, knowing that I didn't have to give a fuck if it was fake. And like, I think the only reason I had that in my head of, oh, you know it's fake, was because maybe that's what adults around me would say. Like if I ever heard my parents or like an uncle or one of my parents' friends talking about wrestling, they would instantly jump to it being fake, as if they had the fucking secret. But you hear that as a kid, and you hear that adults don't like it, so I guess it made an impact on me. Oh, I don't like that thing. That's a thing we don't like. Which, you know, that's why it's a little side tangent. I remember I was like 14. I was watching a History Channel documentary, and it was about like racism and the KKK. And it was like this group of adults in their KKK hoods and robes and shit. And they were all circling around this like fire of burning crosses out in some fucking field, and who gives a shit somewhere. And then there was little KKK members with them, and they took the hoods off, and they were like 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old kids in KKK outfits, like dancing and playing with their parents around this fire. And it made me so fucking sad that like, you're a kid and you're being told this is what's right, and you don't know shit, but the adults say it, so you think that's the way to be. So those kids are going to grow up thinking, oh, this is what life is like. We don't like those people, because that we just don't. You know, I'm equating little children being raised as racist to me thinking I shouldn't like wrestling because it's fake. But you know, the same principle is there, the same idea of impact being made as a child, you know, all that sort of shit. After I got over the fake thing and I had that epiphany, I started fucking watching as often as I could. And I've told stories over the years of like watching Sting take down the NWO and stuff, and when I analyze it, like when I was taking notes for this episode and I really think about it, those stories are complete fabrications and fake memories. Because if I'm going by the actual history of my first memory of Raven on Nitro, that had to be like 1997. And the Sting NWO shit, that all happened in like 1996, end of 97. So there's definitely, I think I watched so much wrestling when I was younger, like stuff that had already happened on like any VHS tape that I could get, that I think some of the stuff that I studied and watched over and over back then, I think in my head, I feel like I watched it happen. But the timeline doesn't really add up. And the timeline fuck-ups are probably going to happen throughout this show, so just bear with me. If I say some shit happened in like 2001, but it was actually 2000, you know what I'm saying? You can tell me in the comments, but you can also you don't have to. Because I'm going to fuck up. That's just the way it's going to be. I was the only kid growing up who WCW was my home. I was not a WWF kid at all. And I look at my allegiance to WCW over the WWF like kind of the same way I look at my modern day preference to DC over Marvel. And it breaks down into, I just love like one side's set of characters, which is funny because it shines through that my two favorite guys from the video game, like my first real exposure to wrestling, were Hogan and Bret Hart. And when I started watching, they were both WCW guys. So I would turn on WCW and I would see the two guys I knew the most about, Hogan and Bret Hart. They were on WCW. So it's like, okay, I already kind of know what's going on. One of my favorite wrestlers of all time, arguably the face of WCW, was Sting. And again, I have no fucking idea the first time I noticed Sting. One of my favorites of all time. He appealed to me. He clicked. I don't know if it was like the black and white or the scorpion or the fact that he didn't talk, but I saw Sting, and to me, I kind of switched over from Bret Hart, and I was like, that's my dude. Like, that's the guy who I'm with. Whatever he does, I'm with him. He's the fucking man. And I think one of the things that made him click with me was, he was black and white, and he had the scorpion. He didn't talk, and he was kind of fucking scary. You never knew when he was going to show up or where he was going to come from. He might come out from under the ring. He might come down from the ceiling. He might be in the crowd or in the rafters with a big-ass fucking bird. You didn't know what was going on. And I think it was just, I don't know what it was about me back then, but even as a kid, my favorite movie was The Nightmare Before Christmas, I'm a little sick, so I'm sorry if I'm sniffling a little bit. I'm not going to edit it out. I don't have time. So, I mean, a lot of kids back then in the early 90s, what's your favorite movie? Oh, Little Mermaid, fucking Lady and the Tramp, Lion King, all this shit. I loved all of those movies, but none of them made sense to me the way The Nightmare Before Christmas did. And if you look at what the difference is, in The Night Before Christmas, everything's dark. The colors are all dark. It's mostly black and gray. Everyone's fucking dead. Everyone's weird. I don't know what it was, but when I was a kid, and even now, that shit just rings true with me. I look at it and it makes sense. And I think Sting was like the Nightmare Before Christmas of wrestling to me. He was black. Is he fucking dead? I don't know. He doesn't say anything. He moves slow, except when he's in the ring. Something about him. I loved it. So that was like the 96, 97 period. Going into 1998, I don't know where the fuck Sting was. Or back then I didn't. Nowadays we know he was like kind of struggling with alcohol and pills a little bit, and he was trying to get his life together, so he took some time off, which totally understandable. As an adult, I get it. You gotta do some real shit sometimes. But I remember being a kid and watching Nitro and Thunder all the time, and it sticks out to me. There were signs in the crowd that said, "Where's Sting?" And I remember being a kid going like, "Where the fuck is Sting?" I watch this show every week for Sting, and he's fucking nowhere to be found. They're not talking about him. They're not showing old videos. I don't know what the fuck is going on. I remember he showed up like in 1999. He was back and he had some excellent matches. One of them was with DDP on Nitro. It was like an impromptu world title match. DDP put the title on the line and they fought through the crowd. They fought on the stage. I remember DDP tombstone Sting, and then Sting he picked DDP up for a pile driver, but he dropped to his knees like a tombstone, and it looked super unsafe. Go back and track that match down somewhere and watch that move. I've never seen anyone do that move again. I don't know what the fuck he was thinking when he did that move, because it was super dangerous. But yeah, I remember Sting having great matches in '99 with DDP, Bret Hart, and Goldberg, and then he did that weird feud with Vampiro, where for a short time they were like the brothers in paint. And then after, Vampiro doused him with blood, and they did that Human Torch match where, oh God, I remember Sting got lit on fire, and they were on top of, the Titantron, way up in the scaffolding, 40 feet, and Vampiro lit Sting on fire, and he disappeared, and then some dude in a Sting outfit, clearly some stunt guy, not even close to the same size, showed up, walked to the edge, lined up his shot, and just did a flip off the Titantron, into a bunch of cardboard boxes. It was the lamest fucking thing I had ever seen. I was 10 years old and I saw right through it. It was terrible. But I just went off on a huge Sting tangent, and that's going to happen a lot, so bear with me. But it wasn't just Sting and Bret Hart that made WCW special for me and made WCW the show that I wanted to watch. But and everybody has this story nowadays, but my personal story, it's also here. The fucking cruiserweights, dude. Like, I was super in to Sting and Bret Hart and all the big names, but WWF had The Rock and Mankind and Austin, and they were all great, but the NWO and Sting were my shit. But you also had Kidman and Chris Jericho and Juventud Guerrera and Psychosis and Eddie and Dean Malenko and Chris Benoit and all these fucking guys. Dude, who remembers Silver King or El Dandy or Super Calo or like all those fucking names, Lash LaRue, all these WCW guys that I can still list off the top of my head. Not all of them were good, but I remember all of them. WCW, I go back now in the WWE Network and I watch some of those specials. Like maybe a month ago, I showed the artist World War III, 1998, which, if you're not familiar, it was WCW's Royal Rumble, but they had to one-up WWE like they always tried to do. So what's WWE have? They have the Royal Rumble, 30 men, one ring, over the top, blah. World War III on the WCW side was 60 men, 3 rings. It was fucking atrocious. It was terrible. And I showed the artist World War III 1998, and he literally said, "This is the worst fucking thing I've ever seen." Because in one ring, it was Nash and just a bunch of jerk-offs. And Nash threw them all over the top rope. Nash would kick a guy on the left side of the screen. On the right side, a guy would fall out of the fucking ring. That's a slight exaggeration, but it seemed like nobody was really putting in any effort into that match. And if you watch it back now, so many people just fall out of the ring for seemingly no reason. It's so goddamn funny. There's guys who are in that match way too long, probably just trying to see if anyone would notice that they were still there. Conan gets eliminated because you don't have to go over the top rope. If you fall out of the fucking ring, it's over. Conan has somebody up against the ropes, and he does this fucking weird thing I've never seen anyone do again. Probably because it was so goddamn stupid. He runs and jumps feet first, just like a fucking drop kick, through the middle rope and just flies out of the ring. And it's one of those spots where, like, if the guy that he jumped at didn't move, what was Conan trying to do? Because I compared it to a drop kick, but that's not what he did. He, like, jumped up and then turned sideways specifically to go out of the fucking ring. Oh, God. It was a complete mess. It was a total fucking mess. A lot of my time watching WCW, I knew something was going wrong. It was in like 2000 when I really started to notice it. So I was 9 going on 10 years old. I was born in December of 1990. So I remember specifically one night, I just knew something was up. Even as a kid, I could tell something was fucking going wrong. Like, all the wrestlers were in the ring. And I think Vince Russo was there too. And Eric Bischoff was like over the phone being played to the entire arena. And he talked for like 5 minutes. This was to open the show, mind you. He talked for like 5 minutes and said that they were taking the titles off everybody. All the feuds were over. And they were basically rebooting WCW. Does anyone fucking remember this? Does anyone remember this at all? Did I make this shit up? I don't think I did. I don't think this is a fucking fever dream. There's a lot of shit that happened in WCW back then that, looking back on it, you're like, I might have made that shit up. There's no way that actually happened in real life. But I'm fairly certain that it did. I'm pretty sure that shit actually happened. They just, in the ring, were just like, no, give me the belt back. We're going to start over. This shit's fake anyway. We're going to start over. What a fucking mess. I remember, like, falling out of love with WCW when, Sid Vicious showed up, and I didn't give a shit about Sid Vicious at all. And it was just, what the fuck? What was going on? Like, it just really started to suck. It was like, even to a 10, 11-year-old kid. Like, I remember one of the last WCW pay-per-views is called like Greed or Sin or something. Just fucking, I guess they were gonna do pay-per-views named after the seven deadly sins if you think about it. Although sin is not a seven deadly sin. I remember like it was like for the world title, Sid Vicious versus Scott Steiner versus some dude. Like they didn't tell you who he was. He just showed up and he was wearing all black and goggles and shit. And so they're doing this match, and like I think it was before the guy even came out. Like Sid Vicious jumped off the middle rope and like broke his leg in half, and no one in the match seemed to care at all. Sid Vicious, his left leg was in like three pieces, and Scott Steiner was like stomping on him, and then this some dude showed up, and he like took his mask off, and it was Road Warrior Animal, and then he started kicking Sid Vicious. I'm gonna pass out. Oh god, I'm so lightheaded. What a fucking mess. Oh god, WCW, it went down the toilet so hard. And you know it's bad when like a 10, 11-year-old kid was watching it going like, Dad, this is fucked up. Something really bad's going on here. Oh, if I rewind a little bit, I remember I did like the angle where it was like Bret Hart, Kevin Nash, Jeff Jarrett, and fucking somebody. They did NWO 2000, and they had the NWO like silver t-shirts, and the new World Order was like underlined because it was like, this is a reboot, NWO like 2.0. I love the idea, but then it just, nothing ever came of it. I think somebody got hurt. I think Bret Hart got hurt, and that fell apart. There was a great thing. It was like Bret Hart and Goldberg were feuding. I think it was the feud that wound up to like Bret Hart, his career ending when he got kicked by Goldberg. But there was this awesome part where like Bret Hart was in the ring in a jersey and he was like talking shit on Goldberg, and then Goldberg came out and Bret was just trying to like really get under his skin. And then Goldberg had enough and he speared Bret Hart super hard. And then he was just dead. Like Bret Hart was knocked out from the spear. And Goldberg was just laying on top of him, and it was like, what the fuck just happened? Did Goldberg just knock himself out? Did someone shoot him in the fucking head? Did they snipe him from the crowd as he hit that spear? Some crazed Bret Hart fan like Steve Buscemi and Billy Madison. So you're just watching this, wondering why they're laying on top of each other. And then Bret Hart gets up first, which was even more confusing, takes his jersey off, and was wearing a steel plate around his rib cage. And all of a sudden, this thing that you thought didn't make sense and was stupid was fucking awesome. Bret Hart, the excellence of execution, did just that. He had this plan that he was going to talk shit on Goldberg until Goldberg came after him, and he was prepared, knock Goldberg out cold, gets up, grabs the microphone again, and is talking about how like he's smarter than Goldberg. That's a standout memory. That was like almost 20 years ago, like 17 years ago, and I remember that clear as day. That was fucking awesome. When WCW was good, it was really good. Like, put on an Eddie Guerrero Rey Mysterio match, a Chris Jericho Rey Mysterio match, a fucking, even like the Bret Hart stuff, even though it was late in his career, when WCW was good, it was fucking great. But it wasn't always great. Oh man, let's move on. It was like, let's talk about ECW. I haven't said shit about ECW yet. I remember ECW. It always felt like something I shouldn't be watching. At my age, I felt when I did find it, it was almost like finding porn. It was like, oh, this is the bloody one with the fire and the barbed wire, and like I heard this one's uncensored. They say fuck and they show titties and stuff, which isn't really true. I mean, it was true-ish. It was definitely like the most, for lack of a better term, extreme of all three of them. But it wasn't as bad as we had it in our minds. It was kind of like fucking Beavis and Butthead. When I was a kid, I wasn't allowed to watch Beavis and Butthead because I think my parents had it in their minds that it was like rated R shit, that it was like a bad influence on kids, when meanwhile it was just retarded. It was complete brain dead stupid. It really wasn't that, like, the content on the show wasn't that bad at all. It was just a total misconception, but I didn't see too much ECW growing up because I never knew when the fuck I could watch it. I never got really drawn into it because I didn't have time to like build relationships with any of the wrestlers, any of the characters. They didn't fucking make sense to me. I remember back when the TV Guide channel existed, you would, oh God, there's probably people listening to this who don't even know what I'm talking about. But back in the day, DanDans, you would turn on the TV Guide channel and it would just be an ever scrolling list of what's on every channel. This is before your remote, you could flip through everything and it would tell you what it's on before you click on it. We used to have to go to the channel to find out what was on, or TV Guide channel would show us, and it would take like 5 minutes to scroll through all the channels. And when I say all the channels, I mean like all 70 channels, because back then that was it. And 70 is exaggerating, because there was nothing on 50 through 62. You know? What a weird fucking time. It's hard to explain this to people. But, to young people, I should say. But I would turn on the TV Guide channel, and every once in a while there'd be like a commercial for ECW on pay-per-view. And the standout moment was they showed RVD get on the top rope and do a front flip into like the fourth row. And I remember thinking, this wrestling is fucking insane. I want to watch this. And every once in a while, I would like catch the show that they had on TNN, which was already far past ECW's prime. But I mean, I was a kid, so I didn't know what the fuck the schedule was. Was it Friday nights? Was it Saturday afternoon? I don't know. You know, it was just like, oh, ECW. But the most ECW exposure I had was the video games. Their video games were not great, but, you know, we'll talk about the wrestling video games in another episode. It was 2001, so we're moving on another year here, where I really started to switch over to the WWF. And it wasn't just because WCW went out of business and WWF bought them, but it was, you know, it was because WCW really started to suck, like I said earlier. I remember, dude, the fucking 2000, 2001, it seemed like every week Kevin Nash and Terry Funk would fight and someone else was in charge. It was such a mess. 2001 was the year that I went to my first show. It was a Sunday Night Heat / SmackDown taping, and it was in September of 2001 in Chicago, Allstate Arena. And if you realize the significance of that date, it was right after 9/11. Someone can fact check me. I think it was September. It might have been like October. But I remember there was a part where Vince McMahon and Kurt Angle were doing a segment outside, right outside their limo, outside the arena. And the Allstate Arena is pretty close to the airport. So the fucking jets come down pretty low and it's really loud if you've never been there. And I remember a jet went over their head super loud and both of them mid-promo stopped talking and looked up at the sky, and then they looked down at each other and made eye contact. And it was a moment that was like, that one sticks out in my head because it was fucking scary. It was right after 9/11, and these two were looking at each other like, what is about to happen? It's a split-second moment. But if you can track that down on YouTube or the WWE Network or whatever, watch that moment and look at the look on their faces when they realize that something could be wrong or everything's going to be okay. I remember that being weird. Another thing I remember at that first show was, let's see how many details I remember of my first wrestling show. I bought an RVD t-shirt. It was the black shirt with the yellow dragon on it that had the two thumbs pointing to itself. I remember it was the show where Undertaker debuted his short haircut, and I shouted from my seat way up in the fucking like nosebleeds. I remember I shouted, "Bald man walking!" and like 3 people laughed, which to me was a victory. I made a couple people laugh. I enjoyed that. It was the show where The Rock said that Vince McMahon had to join the Kiss My Ass Club, and he brought out Trish, and Trish pulled her ass out, and then The Rock was like, no, and he like made Vince kiss Rikishi's ass. Man, that was a good show. And it opened with Sunday Night Heat, and I was still a kid, so I didn't realize that they taped them at the same time. And when I saw the Heat graphic and it was all orange and stuff, I was like, we paid to see SmackDown, not Sunday Night Heat. They better switch it. And looking back on it, I feel like such a dickhead, because when I say we paid, my friend's family brought me to that show. I didn't pay for dick. And his friend's mom, my friend's mom, actually bought me a program back when those existed. I don't even know if they make those anymore, but it was a really nice high gloss book with photos of the full roster. I still have it somewhere. And I couldn't afford it. I only brought enough money I bought a t-shirt, and I wanted a program, and she bought me a program and said all I had to do was pay her back. She was a nice fucking lady. That was Bobby Morrissey's mom, Wendy. Fucking top-notch lady in my book, you know what I'm saying? Even though they put milk in the bowl before the cereal. But that's another story. God damn. What the fuck was I talking about? Oh yeah, I switched over and became a WWF guy when I was a kid. I was like 11, and ECW and WCW didn't exist anymore. They got bought up. But even before that, I started to switch over, and the main reason was Jeff Hardy. I was obsessed with Jeff Hardy when I was a kid. He became my favorite wrestler fucking by far. I was enamored with everything he did. He had a cool look. His hair was a different color on every fucking episode. He was shaving designs into his head. His moveset was incredible. His brother Matt, they made a great tag team. I love the shit they did together and separately. And I will take this to the grave. The Hardy Boys, Dudley Boys, Edge and Christian ongoing feud for like the year prior and that entire year, that's one of the best fucking feuds ever. You know what I'm saying? And I'll stand by that. WrestleMania 2000 Triangle Ladder Match. TLC at SummerSlam 2000. TLC 2 at WrestleMania X7 or 17, whatever you call it. Royal Rumble 2000 Elimination Table Match, Hardys and Dudleys. Edge and Christian and the Hardys, the No Way Out 99 Ladder Match, or was that No Mercy? I don't remember. The Edge and Christian Hardy Boys cage match that they did. Fuck, dude. Every combination of those two teams, they always fireworks every fucking time. It was always going to be a good match, and you knew that shit. Who remembers that the ladder match that Edge and Christian and the Hardys did on Raw for the tag titles? It was like the night after a cage match or something, and just out of nowhere, it was like, yo, here's this ladder match. And it was fucking awesome. You could put those teams together at any time, in any pairing, singles or teams, or all of them at the same time. It was always going to be fucking good. God damn. I need to go back and watch some of those again. TLC and TLC 2 and that Royal Rumble tag table match, I remember those like the back of my hand. If you gave me a piece of paper and said, write out what that match is, sequence by sequence, I could probably get pretty fucking close to doing it. And that's not an exaggeration. I watched those matches. I wore out my best of 2000 WWF VHS tape in my VCR. I watched it too many times, the fucking thing broke. Specifically because of the TLC match at SummerSlam. One of my favorite matches of all time. And there's people on the internet who, I don't know, it was like mid-2000s started to shit on that sort of thing and like, oh, that's spot monkey stuff. And I don't fucking care. I think it's fun. I love watching that shit. But as ECW and WCW came together into WWF, a lot of guys disappeared, like Goldberg and Sting. Like a lot of my favorite guys just weren't around anymore. I became obsessed with Jeff Hardy. Dude, at fucking school, I was drawing on my arms. I was wearing socks on my arms, cutting holes in them. Everything that guy did, I was trying to mimic. And I'm not embarrassed about that. You know what I'm saying? Back then, he was a role model, you know? And he's a role model again now. He's clean, even though there's Victory Road in there at some point, if you know what I'm talking about. My favorite guys, though, it kind of expanded around this area. I became super obsessed with RVD. And partially because he was another guy who, he had like a high-flying moveset, but he wasn't a cruiserweight, kind of like Jeff Hardy. Like, there were two guys on the like medium-sized to big end who would do these excellent fucking moves. And RVD was just way more agile than Jeff Hardy. Like, Jeff Hardy was fucking awkward. And RVD was just super silky smooth, and he would do backflips like nothing. It was great. I loved it. A standout moment from 2001 for me was the two-man power trip when Austin and Triple H became a tag team and they won every fucking belt in the company. Like, that was, I remember thinking that was really cool. First of all, that these guys were coming together into a team. And second of all, that they had the Intercontinental, the World title, and the tag titles. I remember thinking that was insane. Oh, dude, when Triple H tore his quad for the first time, and it was when the two-man power trip when they lost the tag titles. It was Austin and Triple H versus Benoit and Jericho in the main event of Raw. And I was so excited for that match. And my fucking dad made my brother and I go to bed because it was a school night. And there were nights that we were allowed to stay up and watch Raw or Nitro. And for whatever reason on this night, that was not the case. We had to go to bed. And I was so fucking bummed. And I'm laying in bed wondering, what happened, who won. And my dad has the nerve to knock on the door, and he comes in and he just goes, Benoit and Jericho won the titles. And I was thinking, motherfucker, like, you made us go to bed and you watched it by yourself, you piece of shit. Fuck, man, I missed it. And I've gone back and I've watched the match since, but and I guess it's good because I have that story now that I didn't see it, and my dad, fucking asshole, comes in and tells us what happened. Going back a little bit, early 2001, WrestleMania 17 or X7, however, back then you said X7 because that's how they marketed the shit. But nowadays I say 17. It's up for debate. Leave a comment. What do you say? I think that was the first pay-per-view I ever got to watch. And that was at Bobby Morrissey's house too. He was one of my best friends back then. Our whole group loved fucking wrestling. It was our favorite thing. And they had a pirated cable box. So we would watch illegal free pay-per-views over there. And the shit would cut out sometimes and it wouldn't work, but other times it did. So for us, it was really cool. And I'll never forget the main event. Like TLC 2 obviously happened that night. I remember being so upset that the Hardys didn't win. But that Edge and Christian won again. I was like, how the fuck are they going to win both of them? These pieces of shit. But I'll never forget Austin turning heel on The Rock and joining with Vince McMahon. And like, I was 11 and I knew that what Austin did was wrong. And I was like, I can't believe Austin's a bad guy. But what made that, and this is a thing that just doesn't exist in wrestling anymore. What made that moment was JR ringside going, son of a bitch! Son of a bitch! Like, he couldn't believe that Austin, the face of the company / his like best friend, would align himself with Vince McMahon. He couldn't fucking believe it. And JR couldn't believe it, which made me at 11 years old going like, wow, I guess I can't believe this. It was that power of suggestion at ringside that JR had that just made it brought it to another level. But we'll fast forward a little bit on to 2002. I have a possibly controversial opinion, and you guys can either agree or disagree with me, but I think 2002 might have been the best fucking year that ever happened in wrestling. And now hear me out, because I got a couple things here about why it might have been the best. First of all, I think the draft is one of the coolest things that ever happened in wrestlers. That ever happened in wrestling. Sorry, I was looking at my notes and I got distracted. The draft changed the way that I would play with my action figures, because now I would split them up into 2 shows. So now I got fucking double the fun out of it. It changed the way I would treat the video games, because even like on paper, I would write down, before the draft existed in the games, I would write down who I had put on which shows. The entire idea of wrestling to me was totally different now that the draft existed. And I don't know, when I think about it now, whether the minority loves or hates the draft. Here's where I want you guys to leave comments. Looking back on it, what do you think about the draft? But at the moment, what did you think about the draft? Because I think there were people who were not happy about it at all. But dude, there was just so much good shit. I loved Ric Flair as the Raw GM, and it was like crazy to me that he was back on WWF TV. WWE now. It's kind of where it switched over. I hated Vince as the SmackDown GM. I hated Vince in general. But as the SmackDown GM, I was like, what a fucking... I hated him so much. 2002, another great moment is Brock Lesnar's rise to prominence. He shows up. He's killing everybody. He dismantles the Hardy Boys. He killed RVD. He won King of the Ring. He screwed Flair out of his job when Vince beat him, got the full ownership back. And then, like, it's crazy to say that this even happened. Brock Lesnar pinned Hogan clean with an F5 on a random SmackDown. Like, what the fuck? Wait, no. I don't think he pinned him. I think he, like, bear hugged the fucking life out of him and Hogan, like, died in the ring or something. This was when Brock was killing everyone, and it was... I love that they were doing this. He wasn't pinning most people. It was like referee stoppage. He was like double and triple and quadruple powerbombing guys until they stopped moving. And the referee was like ringing the bell to save the guys' lives because nobody was going to be able to stop him. It was like, at this time, I'm 12 years old now, and I'm watching, and I was like, this guy is fucking insane. I loved it. Oh, there was a part, it was on a Raw in 2002. You guys should look this up on YouTube. The Hardys attack Lesnar, and they hit him in the head with some of the hardest fucking chair shots I've ever seen to this day. You know what I'm saying? They're just unbelievable, the sound they make. Look up, like, Hardy Boys Brock Lesnar chair shot and watch that shit on YouTube. It's fucking disgusting. 2002 had the Triple H versus Chris Jericho feud, which culminated in that awesome Hell in a Cell match at Judgment Day. It had the Edge versus Kurt Angle feud, where Kurt's head got shaved fucking bald, which, side story on that one. If you've listened to the 616 Entertainment podcast, you've heard this story, but in case you haven't, I'm going to tell it again. Right around the time that Angle's head got shaved bald, I took my Kurt Angle action figures, and my dad had like a sandstone grinder or whatever you call it in the garage. I turned it on and I shaved the hair off of my Kurt Angle action figure's head. I like sanded it off because they didn't make the action figure yet. This shit just happened, but I wanted my action figure to be bald so it would look real, and I fucked it up so bad. I had this Frankensteinian looking Kurt Angle that I tried to take the hair off, and his head was just all blocky and caved in. It was fucking disgusting. I remember my brother like couldn't even look at it. So I basically had to throw that one. Like, I just wouldn't use it anymore because it looked so fucking strange. So I took my other Kurt Angle action figure, and I took some brown paint and some white paint, and I mixed it together, and I like perfectly matched the skin tone, and I painted his hair, his skin tone, so he would look bald. But his fucking hair on the action figure, like, he had a full head of hair, so it just looked like his brain was coming out of his skull. I basically ruined every Kurt Angle action figure that I owned trying to make it like up to date. Oh, God, I don't know what the fuck I was thinking. Oh, dude, 2002 also had the return of Shawn Michaels, which nobody saw coming. He, like, came back, and they did the DX thing, and Triple H turned on him, and he said, oh, I was always better than you, which led to... when the fuck did Triple H... Like, somebody put Shawn's head through, like, a car window, and all the... Like, the entire Raw... Triple H was going backstage trying to find out who did it, and then they like unscrambled the video, and it showed it was Triple H who did it the whole time. So then they did like the unsanctioned street fight at SummerSlam, and Shawn Michaels won, and it was incredible that Shawn Michaels was even in the ring because we all thought he was fucking done and his back was toast. And so he does that match and he wins, and then he comes back again, and they do the Elimination Chamber for the title, which is one of my favorite matches of all time. Survivor Series 2002 Elimination Chamber, first one ever. That's a fucking 10 out of 10 match. The start to finish, the whole thing is great. I remember I was home from school. I had strep throat, and my dad got me a VHS copy from his buddy who would tape them. So I didn't know who won yet because we didn't even have the fucking internet, really. So I popped the tape in, I'm home from school, and I click play. I'm laying in my bed, watching it on my VCR. And when Shawn Michaels won, I had no voice. And I was like, Dad, Shawn Michaels won the title. It was an incredible moment. I couldn't fucking believe that happened. And while we're on the subject, Survivor Series 2002, No Mercy 2002, those are two fucking excellent shows. Survivor Series 02 has the first ever Elimination Chamber, bunch of good stuff. No Mercy 02 has the Guerreros, Angle Benoit, Edge Mysterio tag title match. It has the Brock Lesnar, Undertaker, Hell in a Cell match for the WWE title. We're still just talking about 2002. This is all stuff that happened in 2002. And I would kill myself if I talked about 2002 and didn't bring up Billy and Chuck. That's one of the best fucking things that ever happened in wrestling. Billy and Chuck. I stand by that. One of the best. It was so good. At the time, I don't think I was super, I don't know. It was like, are they gay? Are they not gay? It was just so much fun to watch, and looking back on it, it pushed the boundaries so far. Go back and watch some Billy. Oh, man. Unless they have all the SmackDown episodes, I don't know if it's really going to live up. The fucking wedding, the Billy and Chuck wedding, and the minister or the priest or whatever is like, join each other in holy matrimony. It doesn't matter whether it's for 20 years or 5 months or 3 minutes. Wait a minute. Did I just hear myself say 3 minutes? And then the priest rips his fucking face off, and it's Eric Bischoff, and 3-minute warning comes out and kills everyone, including Stephanie McMahon. Dude, Billy and Chuck, top notch. Top fucking notch. That's all just stuff off the top of my head for 2002. 2002 is the best year in wrestling history. Stand by that. 2003, let's talk about that. 2003 was fun. There were dips for me for sure. Like Jeff Hardy left WWE amidst all sorts of rumors. you know, there was a whole bunch of shit going on. And then just confirmed stuff looking back on it. Like he was struggling with drugs pretty bad. He was missing shows. You know, I'm glad he's got his life together now because he's got 2 daughters at home. But, you know, that sucked as a fan that my favorite guy left. Scott Steiner and Triple H. It was like a fun feud, but the matches were terrible. Like I remember Steiner and Triple H, they did like the arm wrestling thing, and that was really fun to watch. Like they were both trying as hard as they could, and then like Triple H started to gain on him, and it was like, holy fuck, Triple H can beat Scott Steiner in arm wrestling. And then Steiner smiles, and they make eye contact, and Triple H is like, what is happening? And Steiner just starts pinning his arm over and over. The build-up was good. It was really fun, but the matches just weren't. And, like, we know now, looking back on it, that Scott Steiner was hurt through a lot of that, and there wasn't a whole lot he could do. But it's like, fuck, man. I wish something could have come of that, because that would have been really cool. He never really amounted to much in WWE, so I don't know. From what I hear nowadays, it seems like he has a pretty bitter taste in his mouth about that. Also, one of the reasons 2003 dips for me a little bit is just because I didn't have cable for most of it. We moved, like we knew we were going to move, and I don't know what the fuck the story was. I think we had not been paying for cable for a long time. We had some sort of hookup or gimmick or whatever, and then it finally got cut off, but for like 6 or 8 months, my dad was like, why would we sign up for cable again when we're going to move? So I didn't get to see a lot of stuff. I didn't get to see Goldberg show up and have his world title run. I didn't get to see Kane lose his mask. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff I missed. The stuff I did get to see was early 2003. So luckily I was able to see Stone Cold's comeback, where like I think Vince told Eric Bischoff he needed Stone Cold to come back or he was going to lose his job as Raw GM. So Bischoff was trying to get Austin back, and it was super intriguing because this was coming off of like a real life Stone Cold walkout. He left the company. And so I remember it culminated with like Eric Bischoff going to a bar where he heard Austin was going to be, and it was like, somebody was there and said Austin would be at No Way Out. So it led to Austin versus Eric Bischoff at No Way Out. Austin just beat the ungodly fuck out of him, and it was so much fun to watch. Oh, that was great. And I think that's what led to like who knows? I'm getting ahead of myself. WrestleMania 19 is one of the greatest of all time. John Cena gained a lot of traction with his rap shit in 2003, which I got to see some of that too, and I became a huge John Cena fan. Early John Cena stuff, dude, I was all about it. I've said this on the 616 Entertainment podcast. I was the kid wearing the lock chain pendant at school, for sure. I was a huge John Cena fan. 2004, let's get on to that. Fuck, man, like, it dropped pretty drastically for me. There wasn't a lot going on in WWE in 2004 that really did it for me. And, you know, at 14 years old, I don't think I had the patience or just kind of the mind to appreciate that JBL was like this awesome heel. I fucking hated him, and I got tired of him, and I wanted him to lose the title, and I wasn't having fun watching him. There were other guys that I wanted to have a title. And it was just, the 2004 roster just isn't really memorable for me. A lot of my friends had stopped watching at this point, or they at least had started to grow out of it. A strong point for WWE in 2002, obviously, and go figure, Triple H versus Shawn Michaels had another feud One of my favorite matches of all time, their last man standing match at Royal Rumble 2004. Put on your WWE network and watch that shit. Because, ooh, god damn, that's a 10 out of 10 right there, too. That one's fantastic. But 2004 was a huge thing for me in wrestling, my history with wrestling, because of TNA. This is when I fell balls deep into TNA. Like, I knew it existed, and I had seen it just really quickly. One night we were at, my mom brought me over to one of her friends' house, and they had some like gimmicked pirated pay-per-view, and I was like flipping through the pay-per-view channels, and I came across TNA, and I remember it was like Raven and somebody, and it was like, it was called like a hard 10 match. I didn't know what the fuck was going on, but I was like, oh, this is another wrestling thing. It was called NWA TNA back then. It was early, but I felt balls deep into TNA because I heard online that Jeff Hardy went to TNA, and I couldn't fucking believe it. Like, for me, a huge Jeff Hardy fan, I didn't know what was going on with him for a whole year. He was just gone. And he shows up and he has this match with AJ Styles, and I started watching TNA on Fox Sports Net. Their first show, I think it was like, they had like a 30-minute show on Fox Sports Net at like 3:30 in the afternoon on a Wednesday. I think those are the correct details. And I remember I would come home from high school and I would watch it, and I was just balls deep in TNA. Like, I was disappointed when Jeff Hardy had 2 world title shots against Jeff Jarrett. He went 0-2. He lost both of them. And I think them not having the balls to put the title on him was one of TNA's early mistakes. They went on to have many mistakes, but that was one of the early ones. Is I think that they would have made a bunch of headlines if they put the world title on Jeff Hardy, because they would have been the first to put a world title on Jeff Hardy, and they fucked up. But TNA, it was just so fresh. Like, I mean, for better or worse, it reminded me of WCW. And for me, like, that was a good thing because I was a WCW kid growing up. I was tired of the WWE. Fucking JBL, Hardcore Holly, Luther Reigns, Heidenreich. When I think of WWE 2004, those are the guys I think of. And at that time, they fucking bored me to tears. I didn't give a fuck about any of those guys. And in TNA, dude, there was fucking Petey Williams, Alex Shelley, Abyss, AJ Styles, Christopher Daniels, and then there was the dudes that I recognized, like Jeff Hardy, Hall and Nash, Raven, but it was a straight up breath of fresh air, and there was shit going down like I don't remember their tag team name, but it was Elix Skipper and Christopher Daniels versus America's Most Wanted in that tag team cage match, and that was when Elix Skipper walked the top of the cage and did that Hurricane Rana off the top of the cage, and it blew my fucking dick off. I couldn't believe it. TNA, I was all about it. Oh god, it was just so fucking good. On to 2005, there was some really good WWE shit in 2005, like Batista winning the Rumble and then taking the title off Triple H. If you don't remember that, that's some dude, gotta go on the network. Gotta watch that. Watch through that couple months there. Even if you just want to watch the pay-per-views, the hype packages will keep you up to date. Dude, that shit was so good. Like, Batista was red hot. And if you were a WWE fan in 2005, you loved Batista. I fucking know I did. And he, like, everything about him was just so cool. He had a cool finisher with the powerbomb and cool tattoos. He was enormous. And so he wins the Rumble, and like Evolution is still kind of together. And Batista wins the Rumble, and Triple H is just like, well, yeah, you're going to go to SmackDown, get that WWE title, and, you know, Evolution's going to continue running the business. And Batista just has this thing of just like, you know, the last time an Evolution member won a title, it was Randy Orton, and we murdered him because you didn't like somebody taking the shine off you. So Batista didn't trust Triple H, and Triple H is just trying to play best friends with him. And then the moment of Batista picking up the SmackDown contract, he does the thumbs up, and he turns it upside down the same way Triple H did to Randy Orton. Amazing. The pop of in person, just with me in the room, and also that crowd. 2005 Batista, top-notch stuff. Top-notch stuff. I remember they did a match, Batista and Triple H. I think it was Batista versus Triple H 2. It was like the second one. And I think it was post WrestleMania. Batista had won the title, and Triple H's whole platform for this match, his whole platform was the pedigree. It was a really cool way to build a match. Triple H was like, the reason you won at WrestleMania was because I didn't land the pedigree. If I landed a pedigree, it would have been 1, 2, 3. Nobody kicks out of the pedigree. So every Raw, it was just putting over how powerful the pedigree is and how Batista has to stay away from the pedigree. What a fucking creative way to get another match out of these guys and keep that shit going. It was awesome. I loved it. But 2005 to me, it fucking belongs to TNA. Like 2005 TNA is probably the best it ever was, I would say. And just right off the top of my head, you know, Unbreakable 05, AJ Styles, Christopher Daniels, Samoa Joe, that triple threat, so good. 10 out of 10. One of the best matches of all time. And while we're on the topic of Christopher Daniels, I'm jumping all over the place, but I don't give a fuck. Christopher Daniels in 2005 was so good. Like, at every fucking pay-per-view, he was the X Division champion. And every pay-per-view, they would line up a new guy, and they would build to it, and it would be like, this is the guy that's going to take the title off Christopher Daniels. And you fucking hated Christopher Daniels. And it was Shocker, and whatever happened to him. It was Shocker and Petey Williams and all these guys would go up against Daniels, and you wanted someone to take the title off him, and nobody could. Like, Daniels, he was too good for these guys. I loved Christopher Daniels to death, and I think he's one of the all-time greats. And there might be people who listen to this who agree with me, or maybe you don't. Tell me in the comments, what do you think about Christopher Daniels, especially this time period for him? The fuck else happened in 2005? TNA signed their Spike TV deal in 2005. Samoa Joe had an amazing 2005 in TNA. And this is where I became like a huge fan of Joe. I knew him from Ring of Honor. But Joe in TNA, he was doing this thing where he was like murdering every member of the X Division. And he was busting them open, and he was putting their blood on a towel. And he would like carry around the towel as a trophy. It was like fucking Predator. How Predator would rip your fucking skull and spine out, and he would keep it as a trophy. Dude, TNA in 2005 was so good. It was so good. But I'm going long here. So 2006, for me, WWE 2006 was largely the same bullshit that I didn't really care for. Other than, there were bright spots. Kurt Angle, Undertaker from No Way Out 2006. That's a 10 out of 10. One of the best fucking matches I've ever seen. Get on the network if you haven't seen that one. So good. Unbelievably good. And fuck, that's like all I remember about WWE in 06. I know like Jeff Hardy returned and he had some good matches. CM Punk WWE debut happened. They put him in ECW. But, dude, 2006 belongs to TNA. I'm going to say it again. I was fully on board with TNA. They pulled off Samoa Joe versus Kurt Angle, which, if you want to be a stickler about it, I've heard people over the years who are like, they rushed it. They should have built it for a year. But I don't fucking agree with that. People already wanted it for more than a year. You've got the guys together. Fucking do it. And they did it. And it was so good. And then Angle versus Joe 2 was fucking good. But the biggest thing that happened for me in 2006 was Sting returned to wrestling, and TNA had me wrapped around their little finger. Fuck. Like, Sting's 2006 was fucking awesome. He returned to TNA and he did that tag match. It was like him and Christian versus Jarrett and somebody. I don't know. I don't really remember. But he seemingly retired the next night. They said on Impact, like, oh, I've got a big announcement or whatever. And the announcement was he never got to say goodbye to his fans, so he retired in the ring that night. He left his boots and his jacket and his bat or whatever in the ring. And they did this thing where, like, Jeff Jarrett and I think it was Eric Young was with him. They didn't really believe that Sting had retired, and they were, like, scared and worried. So Jarrett sent Alex Shelley to go film Sting at his house. And Sting caught him, and he beat the fuck out of everybody, and they did the Lethal Lockdown match. It was a big cage clusterfuck, and some bullshit happened after that, but eventually it was Bound for Glory 06. And it was Sting's career versus Jarrett's NWA World title. And Sting was off TV and they were showing these vignettes with Sting having like green and blue face paint and all this shit, which he had not had colors in his face paint since 96, like 95. You know what I'm saying? So it was huge. It was like, what the fuck are they going to do? They kept saying Sting was transforming. This could be his last match. And there was all these biblical references. It was like, it was heavy shit. It was like, we're going to see the new Sting for the first time in forever. And so he comes out at Bound for Glory with a whole new outfit, whole new look. It was like he had these new red and black tights with like a gold scorpion, no shirt. So it was a totally brand new look. And he was in great shape. And so they do Jarrett versus Sting. And I think Kurt Angle was a special referee. And it was a goddamn good match. Like, you hear Jeff Jarrett versus Sting and you think, oh yeah, it's probably like average, run of the mill. It was good. And I say this as a huge Sting fan, so if there's a little bias there, maybe that's the point. Or maybe that's the case, not the point, I should say. But what made this match so excellent was Jarrett hits Sting with the guitar. And if you've ever seen a Jeff Jarrett match, nobody fucking gets up after the guitar shot. So he cracks the guitar over his head, and I'm like, I cannot believe that they just did all this just for Sting to put Jarrett over. So he cracks the guitar over his head, and Sting fucking no-sells it. He flexes at Jarrett and screams at him, beats his chest. Nobody has ever done that before or since. That was a one-time thing ever, and I marked out like a fucking child. That's like a top 5 moment for me as a wrestling fan of all time. It was fucking amazing. Sting makes Jarrett tap out, wins the NWA World title. It was fucking awesome. Let's go to 2007. 2007 was, I think, one of the last years I really gave a shit about wrestling. And for me, 2007 was owned by TNA once again. Like, one of the best matches of 2007 by far was Samoa Joe versus Christian Cage. I think it was Destination X. And from what I remember, that one was a fucking 10 out of 10. One of my favorite matches of all time. An interesting little note about it, I have not seen that match in like 10 years. I haven't seen it since it happened live on pay-per-view, and I remember it being a 10 out of 10. But for whatever reason, I have not even once tried to watch it again. So I wonder if it holds up. I've brought it up in conversation to people who are fans and know what the fuck they're talking about, and they agree with me about that one being really good, but I gotta go back and watch that one finally, I guess. Another awesome 2007 thing was Awesome Kong, or Amazing Kong, whatever you want to call her. But, dude, she was fucking so cool in TNA. It was like the first time as an adult that I gave a shit about women's wrestling, not just because of asses and titties, but because it was really interesting. You know, because when I grew up with wrestling, like 13 through whatever, I wasn't watching women's wrestling because it was good. You know what I'm saying? I was like 13 years old, and it was Trish, and it was Lita, and Tori, and Stacy, and I was like, you know what I'm saying? That's not to undermine the talent that those girls had, but there was a few talented girls back then. And a lot of the other ones were just hot. But, dude, the TNA girls in 2007, knockouts, as they call them, so good. So awesome. And it was fun to watch on a week-by-week basis. And oh my God, I talked about Alex Shelley filming Sting at his house earlier because Jarrett put him up to it. Paparazzi Productions. Holy shit. This was Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin, and they were just filming shit backstage and fucking off and doing these skits. And, dude, Billy and Chuck was fun and entertaining, but Paparazzi Productions was hilarious, straight up like belly laughs sort of shit, and they were great on their own, but when they got put with Kevin Nash, it was even better. Like, Kevin Nash got put with them, and he was out of his fucking mind. Like, I remember Nash was like getting all the X Division guys together, and it's like the X Division Gauntlet Battle Royal for Bound for Glory for pay-per-view or some shit like that. There was Dr. Nash, where he was interviewing all the X Division guys, trying to like give them a gimmick so they would be successful and sell merchandise. And I remember he had like Sanjay Dutt sitting down at the table, and he was just like, "Do you know who this is?" And he was like, "Yeah, that's Sting." He was like, "He is now." He was just Steven when I met him until I gave him a character, and now he is man known Sting. Oh god, it was so fucking funny. There was a scene where like it was Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin and Kevin Nash, and they were talking in the bathroom, and it was just unbelievable. It was so good. Nash had this ongoing joke where he would always accuse Sanjay Dutt of being on steroids. He would call him a gashead. They were doing like a push-up. They were doing like a physical contest backstage at the Impact Zone. And he was just like, the first test is jumping jack. I don't know why I was still doing the Dr. Nash voice. He wasn't doing that. He was like, the first test is jumping jacks. Jay Lethal, you're up first. It's like, why do I got to go first? Nash goes, because you're black. Fuck, man. Nash and Paparazzi Productions in TNA 2007. Unbelievable. I remember Chris Harris and James Storm did some sort of like Texas death match, I think they called it. It was just this insane bloodbath. Sting and Abyss had a really cool feud where Sting was like trying to bring Abyss out of the darkness or something. I don't know. It was fucking weird. I remember Abyss like chokeslammed Sting onto a casket and raised him up into the ceiling for some reason. I don't know. Jay Lethal was great in 2007. TNA in 2007 was great. If WWE could secure the TNA library, I would pay triple for the WWE network. You know what I'm saying? I would be so much more happy to be paying monthly for that service. WWE in 2007, this is completely honest right now, I remember nothing. Absolutely nothing. I'm being for real about that. I could do research and try to remember stuff, but off the top of my head, nothing. And that's sad. All I know is October 23rd, 2007, my dad brought me to Raw. We had great seats behind the announcer's table, like 6 or 7 rows back. And we had a really good fucking time. I got to see Jeff Hardy live. And now that my dad is gone, that is a memory that I cherish. So if I'm looking for a 2007 WWE memory, that's the one. 2008 is where I was done. I don't remember anything about WWE or TNA from 2008. I was fully entrenched in MMA at this point, and I still am to this day. I've never let up on MMA. I've been a hardcore fan of fighting for like 12 years now, and I've never even gone through dips the way I do with wrestling. And I think it's just because like I was tired of wrestling. My friends had stopped watching. The only place I could talk about wrestling was online, and holy shit, if you don't know, the wrestling community online is fucking terrible. It's a toxic waste, pure shit pile of garbage, full of cynics and experts who don't actually fucking know anything. People who take it way too seriously. Everything sucks. Bring back the Attitude Era. Holy shit. I think the internet is unfortunately one of the worst things that's ever happened to fucking wrestling. And it's one of the things that took me out of wrestling the most. But one of the other reasons I stopped watching is just because I knew what was going to happen. You know, I would watch with one of my friends who was not a wrestling fan. And it would be like, a guy in the ring is cutting a promo, and then his guy that he's cutting the promo on comes out with him, and then a tag team attacks them and like, well, you guys don't deserve to be the main event. I'm like, okay, so clearly the two enemies have to team up and take on this tag team. And then Teddy Long or whoever would come out and be like, tag match, playa. And my friend, who's not a fan, would be like, you called that. But really, it's just, if you watch wrestling, you know that that's what's going to happen. That's what they do. You know, it's the same fucking patterns over and over again. And I was tired of it. I was 18 years old. I felt like I was smart, even though you don't know dick when you're 18. But I was done. I was done. I was over it. 2009 and 2010, I avoided wrestling like the fucking plague. I know WWE was doing the Raw guest host shit, which I could not stomach. I don't know what the fuck TNA was doing. I didn't care at all. When I think of this time period in wrestling, and this is like disgusting and hilarious, when I think of this time period in wrestling, I think of Bob Barker, Great Khali, Bobby Lashley. I think of shit like that. Finley. I think of MVP. And like, not all those guys are terrible. Like, you know, Finley is a good in-ring guy. MVP was fun to watch, but no thanks. You know, No thanks. I don't need it. I was completely uninterested. Um, the only things I do regret about staying away from wrestling at this period was I missed Jeff Hardy's first world title wins. I missed CM Punk's rise to the world title. I missed Sting's ongoing career in TNA. Even though it was towards the end of his career, I was missing a lot of it. Um, and even with all those things happening, that shit would have had me like hyperventilating as a child. I couldn't get myself to care as an adult at all. Like I remember just being like, "Oh, what's going on with wrestling?" I went to WWE.com and I saw Jeff Hardy won the world title, and I was like, "Wow, wow, they finally did it." And then I just went to some other website, and like it hurt a little, because me as a kid, I didn't touch on this in 2002, but the Jeff Hardy Undertaker ladder match for the undisputed title on Raw, I fucking almost went through my living room coffee table because I was jumping up and down on it. Because I was like, Jeff Hardy's going to win the undisputed title. Me at 12 years old, couldn't handle it. Could not fucking handle it. That would have been the end of the world. I could have died happy. But as an adult, he actually does win the WWE title from Triple H and Edge. And I was like, good for him. Cool. It hurt a little bit in a way. Like I felt like part of my childhood was gone. And, jumping forward, I'm going to start to get a little more concise here. It was after stopping watching wrestling in 2008, so 08, 09, 2010, I didn't watch wrestling for like 3.5 years. It was CM Punk's pipe bomb that brought me back into wrestling, which is, I think, a story that a lot of scorned, lapsed wrestling fans have to this day. That's what brought me back. And I was always a Punk fan. I was a Punk fan in 2005. I was there the night he superplexed Jimmy Rave off the top of the cage at Ring of Honor, Nowhere to Run, I think it was, at the Frontier Fieldhouse. Yeah, I remember that. I was there that night. I was a straight edge kid, and I still am. But before CM Punk, I didn't even know I didn't know straight edge had a name. I knew that that's how I wanted to live my life because of like my family and whatnot, and personal stories about everyone in my bloodline having addiction issues at some point. I was like, not me, motherfucker. I didn't know that there was a name for it. I didn't know that there was a group of people who went by that, So it was when I got interested in CM Punk that I was like, oh, this guy's a great wrestler. I like his look. I like his moves. And he's kind of like me. It's like the story that Punk has about Roddy Piper, watching Piper as a kid going, that's me, in a way. But yeah, it was 2011, the pipe bomb shit, and Punk winning the WWE title. It was him getting the limelight that, for the first real time, that got me to come back and watch again. And I was having fun. I had a lot of fun with it. 2012 was more the same. I started going to Raw whenever it was in town, and I was watching like the pay-per-views, going to Buffalo Wild Wings with friends and coworkers and shit like that. It felt good to be a wrestling fan again. I didn't miss it when I was not watching. I walked away from it. I was done. But now that I was back, like I was fucking back. I was having a good time. CM Punk and Paul Heyman coming together in 2012 was all-time stuff. It was great. I think Kane and Daniel Bryan was that year. Team Hell No, I think they were called. That shit was hilarious. I loved it. I think this is when The Shield debuted and the Wyatt family. Was that 2012? Or was that 13? I don't know. I can't remember. But this is all shit that I saw around this time, and it's shit that I'm glad that I came back for, because I really would have been bummed as a fan nowadays if I didn't see that. And like I said, I'm going faster here, more concise. 2013 was great. Punk versus Lesnar at SummerSlam is a standout memory. Fucking love that one. The Shield took on Cody and Goldust at Battleground. And this is a 10 out of 10. One of the greatest matches of all time. For me, personally. Just the story of like, Cody got fired and then Goldust returns. He's like going to fight for his brother's job back, and he loses to Randy Orton, gets RKO'd. So he gets fired too. He's not allowed to come back. And then Big Show knocks out Dusty. And it's like Cody and Goldust have to team up. And if they can win, they save their dad's job. And they get their jobs back. And they have to face the fucking Shield. Like, it's not an easy match. Like, they got to beat the fucking Shield. And this match is so good. And the story of Cody and Goldust teaming up with Dusty in their corner. Spoilers, when they win this match and Cody, Goldust, and Dusty are in the ring and they hug, I cried watching that match. And I'm not even kidding. I cried. Like, I wasn't like that, but a tear, you know what I'm saying? And I don't know if there was ever a time in wrestling before, other than like a death or something, that I shed a tear. And I don't think it's happened since. It was unbelievable. It was so good. Battleground 2013, Shield and the Rhodes Brothers. Like I said, go on the network. I hope you guys are taking notes and you're going to watch some of these matches. Yeah, I'm getting a little shorter with my words here because like this shit is all so recent that it kind of becomes a blur. You know, like I don't have the years and years of ruminating on these events the way I did with this shit from the 90s and the early 2000s. In early 2015, the artist and I started doing a show called WWE Raw Talks Live, where, you know, every Monday we would watch Raw and take notes and go live on YouTube and review the whole show. And I like, you know, I enjoyed doing this because it kept me invested in the product, and it led to one of my favorite things ever. That show was so fucking insane and off the rails stupid. We did it for over a full year weekly. That was great, but it was after that full year that doing that show and watching wrestling together, it started to feel like work. It felt like a job, you know? It wasn't fun anymore. And I think it wasn't just because of the show, us doing the show, I mean, but it was because of the WWE show. Like, I felt like the product, the quality of it was starting to dip again, and 2015 wasn't really my cup of tea. I wasn't really into it. And just doing Raw Talks Live meant I was giving away every fucking single one of my Monday nights. Like, because at the time, here's my day. I wake up at 8:30. I go to work until 4, which means I get home at like 4:30. I would watch 3 hours of Raw, which usually was not any fucking good at this point. I was kind of over it. I was done. So I'm taking notes. I tear my bedroom apart before Raw starts. I put the table where it needs to go. I set up the lights. I get the computer where it needs to be because the presentation for me was important. I wanted to look cool because I give a fuck about what I do. So then we live stream for an hour or an hour and a half. Then I have to make the thumbnail. I got to make sure it archives the right way. I got to unprivate it. I got to put my room back together. So the whole thing was a fucking pain in the ass. And that means my Monday starts at 8:30 and my Monday would end at like 1 a.m. Like, and after a while, Raw Talks felt like work, so it felt like my whole fucking day was working. And I was, you know, I wasn't hanging out with friends on Monday nights. I wasn't doing dick because I had to watch Raw and do Raw Talks Live. So, and the product, dude, wasn't into it. And I stopped watching wrestling again until like early 2017. So I took another year and a half off. And like, that's kind of what wrestling comes down to me, is I will go through periods where I love it and I want more and I want to entrench myself in wrestling. But then I go through periods where I don't fucking want to watch it at all. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to see it. I'm not interested. And I think it's really important when you're not interested or you're going through a lull or a dip with wrestling to fucking walk away. You know, wrestling is going to be there when you come back, when you decide you want to watch it again. It's not your whole fucking life. If it is your whole life, you got to figure that out. Unless you're in the business, then it's understandable because that's how you make your money and stuff. But if you're just a fan who's watching, when it starts to slow down for you, you got to walk away. And I think that's what it comes down to. That's my history with wrestling, Dan. I'm gonna cut it there. For me, wrestling is great memories and terrible letdowns. If it went from being my whole life as a kid to avoiding it like a plague in my later teen years. And I think the takeaway here is that wrestling it'll always be a part of my life, you know, but rather than continuing to watch and hating it when I don't want to and becoming one of those cynical internet cunts, I'm a guy who will walk away and come back whenever the fuck I decide to. That's kind of what it comes down to for me. And I don't, like I said at the beginning, I don't feel the pressure to ingest everything. I don't have to watch TNA or whatever you call it nowadays. WWE, Raw, SmackDown, NXT, New Japan, all of it. No. I watch Raw on Monday, the short version, and I watch the pay-per-views. That's all I got time for, and that's all I enjoy. You know what I'm saying? NXT, don't get me wrong, when I turn it on, it's always fun. But I just take in as little as I want to. The only other wrestling I really watch is freelance wrestling, and that's not even a cheap plug. One of the things that I think brought me back to wrestling to begin with was freelance wrestling, which is if you're listening to this outside of Chicago-based indie, in my opinion, the fucking best one in the country. And I don't just say that because I'm friends with all the boys and I worked there. I did commentary for a very short amount of time. That's not why I say it. I think the show is fucking good because of guys like Stevie Fierce and Darren Corbin and Alex Olsen, Matt Nix, Chris Castro, Kenny Sutra, Craig Mitchell, Shug D, Bryce Benjamin, Acid Jazz. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to stop right there. I'm not even going to keep doing names because I could go through the whole roster and still forget some of the best fucking guys. You know? Freelance wrestling is one of the things that makes me love wrestling now, and I love going to those shows. And I would like to tell everybody to go to those fucking shows. Anybody who's listening to it. FreelanceWrestling.com, get a goddamn DVD. That's a joke on the 616 Entertainment podcast is we plug freelance. We pretend to stumble into it and do the whole, can you get a hoodie? Yeah. Can you get a DVD? Yeah. Can you get a shirt? Yeah. And this is freelancewrestling.com. It's a bit, but for here, I'm being fucking real about it because I really do love all those guys and they always put on such a good show. See, dude, I was naming great names. I didn't even bring up Mustafa Ali or Isaiah Velasquez. I should blow my head off. This is why I stopped naming names because I knew I'd forget people. So, oh man, that's my crazy ride with wrestling. Being a commentator, even for just like the 2 shows that I did it. As a kid, if future me went back and told myself as a kid that I would ever get the chance to do that, his head would fucking explode. You know what I mean? I've had a weird journey with wrestling over 27 years, and this is just as a guy who's been a fan. And I hope this introductory, you think maybe it's time to wrap this up? I hope this introductory episode of the 616 Entertainment Wrestling Podcast was entertaining. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope I brought up some memories that made you go, oh shit, and you remember it too. You know what I'm saying? Man, this was episode 1. I will see you guys next time, and I hope you enjoyed it. Please like this, share it all around. Tell everybody about this brand new podcast, and if you want to come on, let me know in the comments. I'll talk about wrestling. You know what I'm saying? I'll see you next time, guys.